I'm doing a sound check real quick. Can anyone hear me?
Hi, Tim. This is Daniel Medina, Air Force. We can hear you loud and clear. Over.
Great. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Okay, and do we have Paula or Gina online?
Yes, I'm here.
Great.
This is Gina.
Hey, Gina, how are you?
I'm good. Just trying to get this last minute stuff done.
Gina, I'm not sure if you've seen, but Cathie Barley has asked to be added as a presenter and asked to have slides loaded.
Hey, Tim, this is Catherine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent.
Hey guys, it's Paula. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
Okay, good. All right.
Hey, Paula, will this online meeting be recorded as well?
Yes, everything will be recorded as well as the court reporter. So if you want to just make sure that's clear, Tim, when you get started.
I will, yeah. Okay. And the court reporter's name is Elvira. So if you see that, you might add her.
Hey, Gina, I don't see the slides.
I know I'm struggling right now. Hang on just a second.
Okay.
And Catherine, this time, would you like me, as soon as we have everything working in here, to go ahead and kick off right at 5 o'clock?
Once we get the slides up.
Yeah. Okay, I'm seeing slides now.
Okay, see him? Okay, great. Okay.
Okay, and Catherine, this is Tim. Are you ready for us to go ahead and kick off?
Yeah.
Okay, Gina, are you ready for us to kick off?
Yeah.
Say again.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Let me just check in. Do you see Elvira listed, Gina?
Yes, I do see Elvira.
Okay. All right, well, let's go ahead and begin if we could. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Good evening and welcome to the Clarks Marsh Interim Remedial Action Proposed Plan public meeting. This meeting relates to the environmental cleanup of the former Wurtsmith Air Force Base. My name is Tim Salton with contractor Galen Driscoll, and I'll serve as facilitator for tonight's meeting. If we could move to the next slide, please. A court reporter is on the line to capture a verbatim transcript of tonight's meeting. This online meeting is also being recorded, so we ask that you hold questions until the end of the presentation. During the informal Q&A session, please let us know if you have a question by raising your hand electronically. I'll call on you to pose your question. We ask that microphones be muted when you're not speaking. This will minimize any background noise that we have. During the formal comment session towards the end of tonight's meeting, the court reporter will record your comment word for word. The Air Force will not respond to your comments tonight. Instead, the Air Force will respond to comments within a responsiveness summary prepared after the end of the 30-day public comment period. Move to slide 3 if we could. So after brief introductions, we'll move into a technical presentation. The major elements of this presentation are displayed here. We'll then have an informal question and answer session. Finally, you'll have the opportunity to make formal comments, and we will conclude this meeting by 7:00 p.m. I'd like to now introduce Dr. Cathie Barley, the Base Realignment and Closure Environmental Coordinator for the former Wurtsmith Air Force Base. Over to you, Dr. Barley.
Hi, I'm Dr. Cathie Barley, the Wurtsmith Program Manager and Environmental Coordinator. I'd like to welcome you all tonight. Thank you for joining us for the Clarks Marsh Interim Remedial Action public meeting. As our moderator just said, a court reporter will be capturing our meeting today. This meeting will take part in 3 parts. First, the Air Force will begin with an overview of the proposed plan. Then we will have our open question and answer discussion. This replaces the conversations we would usually have at a poster session. When this portion occurs, We ask that you virtually raise your hand and wait for the moderator to call on you, and then state your name before you ask your question. The third and final portion of this meeting will be verbal formal comments. And again, we ask that you raise your hand and wait to be called on before submitting your comment. And as Tim, our moderator, just mentioned, those comments will not be answered on the spot. There first will take time to actually consider each of those comments with all the comments that are submitted through the formal comment process, which can be emails or through the U.S. Postal Service to me. And as has been stated before, the proposed plan is, as the name suggests, it is proposed. It is the best that we have been able to come up with based on the information that we have had available. So your reviews matter, and we will consider each formal comment before any final decisions are made. So what we will do today is we will view, discuss, and capture comments on the proposed plan for Clark's Marsh Interim Remedial Action. I would now like to introduce you to the person who has been actively communicating this project throughout BCT and RAB updates, Ms. Paula Bond.
Thanks, Catherine, and thanks everybody for joining us this evening. So like Catherine said, I'm going to give you a summary of the proposed plan that has been posted to the Air Force Administrative Record and placed in the information repository at the library. So I'm going to run through that. So Gina, next slide, please. So the Clark's Marsh Interim Remedial Action that we are looking at and the proposed plan for that action. Why are we looking at even doing an interim remedial action? It's to reduce the volume of PFOS and PFOA impacted groundwater entering Clark's Marsh. We are building on the successes of the fire training area FT002 treatment system that's already there, while we're continuing to determine the nature and extent of the groundwater plume there. And I just want to remind everyone that this is an early interim action that's being conducted before the remedial investigation and the feasibility study have been completed. So the proposed plan that we're looking at today is just that, the proposed plan. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that if you attended the RAB meeting back in January, this is the same slide that we presented there. And this just kind of gives you an overview of the action process. You know, we started with the IRA scoping. That portion of the project has been completed. The remedial design, the proposed plan, which is the phase that we have just completed. In the gray circle, the 30-day public comment period that we're in right now, and that's of course the reason for the public meeting tonight. So that will be followed by the interim record of decision, the interim remedial action work plan, and then finally the implementing the actual interim remedial action. Next slide, please. So just to give everybody some information before we get started on where you can access the proposed plan and how to submit those comments, like the proposed plan for review at the Air Force Administrative Record electronically, and the website is shown on the presentation where you can go download that. There is a hard copy in the information repository at the Robert J. Parks Public Library. And we've listed the library times here on the slide for you. The 30-day public comment period, the 18th through April the 17th, 2021. And what that means is the public has until April 17th to submit their questions to Dr. Varley, email or through the regular mail. I will let you know if you download the hard copy or go to the library and get the hard copy, or you download a copy from the Air Force Administrative Record. On the last page of the proposed plan is a comment form. If you print that off, you can write your comments on the form. You just fold it, tri-fold it, and there's a place for a stamp, and you just drop it in the mail. So I just want to let everybody know that. Okay, next slide, please. So, like I said, the Air Force will accept written comments through April 17th. And then I've already talked about the comment letters being postmarked by April 17th and submitted to Dr. Barley. Her address is here. And then her email address is also, if you would rather email her your comments. Next slide, please. So the Clarks Marsh proposed plan presents background information and the rationale for the interim remedial action that's being proposed. It explains the remedial alternatives that were considered by the Air Force for the IRA. It presents the preferred alternative that the Air Force has believes is the best alternative. It explains how the public can participate in the decision-making process. So that information is all included in the next slide, please. So just a little bit of background on the fire training area, FT002. It's located in the southwest corner of the former Wurtsmith Air Force Base. It operated as a fire training area from 1958 to 1991. Aqueous film forming foam was used at the fire training area between 1970 and 1991. And AFFF containing PFOS and PFOA were released during those fire training exercises to the soil where it leached into groundwater and where it has migrated into groundwater and then on into Clarks Marsh. PFOS and PFOA concentrations in the groundwater at FT002 and Clarks Marsh exceed Michigan's Part 201 groundwater cleanup criteria. Next slide, please. So again, if you attended the RAB meeting in January and October, actually last October, these figures were presented. The figure on the left shows just the location of the fire training area, and hopefully you guys can see that on your screens. And then you can see the fire training area is kind of in the north central portion of the figure, and then as you move south, you can see Clarks Marsh and the wildlife area, and then the blue represents one of the ponds within the marsh there. The figure on the right shows the combined PFOS plus PFOA groundwater plume as we understand it today, and it also shows the location of the proposed extraction wells for the interim remedial action. And then it also identifies where the current FT002 groundwater pump and treat system is actually located. So this is just to kind of orient you as we go through the summary. Next slide, please. So there is an existing pump and treat system at FT002. It was installed in 2014 and 2015 as a time-critical removal action to reduce the migration of PFOS and PFOA into Clarks Marsh. Groundwater is pumped from those 7 existing extraction wells at approximately 241 gallons per minute. And the extracted groundwater is treated by granular activated carbon adsorption before it is discharged into groundwater infiltration galleries. FT002 has reduced PFOS and PFOA concentrations at locations down gradient of the extraction well field by up to 90% since startup. Next slide, please. The objective, the interim remedial action objective, or RAO, is to increase the amount of contaminated groundwater that the fire training area FT002 system captures and treats, reducing the migration of groundwater containing PFOS and PFOA into Clarks Marsh. The remediation alternatives that were evaluated to do this included no action, expanded hydraulic control using pump and treat with ion exchange, and expanded hydraulic control using pump and treat with GAC. Next slide, please. So the alternatives that we evaluated in the proposed plan started with no action. It is required by CERCLA that we evaluate the no action alternative, and we use that as a baseline against which all other alternatives are compared. Under this alternative, no actions are taken, including monitoring, and obviously the cost is zero. Under this scenario, no additional work would be done, but the existing FT002 treatment system would continue to operate. So we're not considering that the existing system is there. We're just looking at the RAO for this particular interim remedial action. Next slide, please. The second remedial alternative that we evaluated was expanded hydraulic control using pump and treat with ion exchange resin. Under this remedy, it increases hydraulic control by adding 5 new extraction wells. It increases the groundwater extraction capacity by 40%. It would use ion exchange resin to treat the extracted groundwater. It does require a new treatment facility to be constructed to house the ion exchange system. It will continue to discharge the treated effluent groundwater into a new infiltration gallery. The existing GAC system would also continue to operate under this alternative, and then the estimated total cost, including operations and maintenance, is $11.8 million. Next slide, please. So the third alternative is expanded hydraulic pump and treat with GAC. Under this alternative, we would increase the hydraulic control by adding, again, 5 new extraction wells, increasing the groundwater extraction capacity by 40%. We would use GAC to treat the extracted groundwater. It does require the expansion of the existing treatment facility to increase the GAC treatment capacity. It would continue to discharge treated effluent groundwater with a new infiltration gallery, and the estimated cost, including O&M, is $9.9 million. Next slide, please. So each remediation alternative, the 3 alternatives, against 9 CERCLA criteria. So under the CERCLA process, we're required to look at these 9 criteria to evaluate each alternative and compare them to one another. So the 9 criteria are listed here on the slide: overall protectiveness of human health and the environment, compliance with AARs, long-term effectiveness, does the remedy reduce the toxicity or mobility or volume through treatment, short-term effectiveness, implementability, cost, support agency acceptance, and community acceptance. So each of these criteria are looked at with regard to each remedial alternative. Next slide, please. So I've put together a table just to kind of show you the evaluation criteria, each of the 9 CERCLA criteria, each of the alternatives 1, 2, and 3, and then just kind of some notes over to the side for each one. So under number 1, protection of human health and the environment, obviously no action would do nothing to protect human health or the environment other than the treatment system that's already there. Pump and treat with ion exchange is protective of the environment, as well as GAC, alternative 3. So 2 and 3 reduce PFAS and PFOA in the Clark's Marsh, and alternative number 1 does not. Complies with AARs. No action does not comply with the AARs. Alternatives 2 and 3 do comply with our AAR, and both would meet the substantive discharge requirement limits under the SRDs that we currently have for the fire training area. Long-term effectiveness, no action does not meet that criteria for long-term effectiveness. 2 and 3 are effective in the long term with continued routine O&M of the system components, change out of the ion exchange resin and the GAC as you move forward. So that would be a long-term. Reduction of toxicity and mobility or volume through treatment. No action does not reduce toxicity or mobility or volume. Alternatives 2 and 3 would both reduce mobility via hydraulic control and absorption either through GAC or ion exchange resin. Under short-term effectiveness, no action is not effective in the short term. Both alternative 2 and 3 are effective in the short term and would not adversely affect workers or nearby residents, or impacts to the environment would be mitigated. And under the short-term effectiveness, those are some of the criteria that we look at under that category, is how the construction of the remedy would affect local workers and residents and the environment. Under implementability, number 6, this category looks at, is the remedy implementable? Are there other infrastructure in the way that would prevent or preclude the remedy from being implemented? So those are the kind of things that we look at under this category. And under no action, yes, that is easily implementable, as well as alternative 2 and 3. Both of those are implementable. Number 7, cost. No action is $0. Pump and treat with ion exchange is 11.8, and pump and treat with GAC is 9.9. Support agency acceptance. The Eagle has reviewed the proposed plan, and they have not objected to either alternative 2 or 3 as an interim remedial action. Number 9, community acceptance. Those categories are all listed as to be determined, and that will be based on comments received during the proposed plan comment period. Next slide, please. The Air Force has, the Air Force preferred IRA interim remedial action is alternative number 3, expanded hydraulic control using pump and treat with GAC. This alternative meets the interim remedial action objective of reducing the migration of PFAS and PFOA in the Clarks Marsh. It is protective of human health and the environment. It does comply with the AARs. It's effective in both the short and long term. It does reduce the mobility of PFAS and PFOA through treatment. And it's implementable, and it is more cost effective than alternative 2. Next slide, please. So alternative 3, the key elements of the proposed FT002 expansion under alternative 3 includes installing 5 new groundwater extraction wells and 1 additional infiltration gallery. It increases the groundwater extraction capacity by 40%. It increases the backwash capability with additional settling tanks. We would install 3 6-foot diameter media beds, each containing 5,000 pounds of GAC. It includes pre-treatment to reduce treatment system biofouling. And we would expand the existing FT002 treatment system building to add the new treatment components. Next slide, please. I think, did you skip one there, Gina? Sorry. So what you see on the slide in front of you now is the conceptual layout for how the expansion of the existing FT002 building. So the area in blue on the top is the existing treatment system, and then the kind of the brown shaded area on the bottom part of the slide are the components that would be added under the alternative 3 with GAC. So you can see that the 3 new carbon vessels, the 3 new GAC vessels, would be slightly smaller than the existing vessels. We would add 2 additional settling tanks under this system scenario, and then the influent water would come into the existing equalization tank. It would be routed through the new carbon tanks, and then through the existing carbon tanks, and then back to the infiltration galleries. Next slide, please. So a written summary of significant comments and new relevant information submitted during the public comment period, and the Air Force's response will be in the responsiveness summary, which is included in the Clarks Marsh interim record of decision. The Clarks Marsh interim ROD will be developed following the public comment period. Once we receive all the comments and address those, the ROD will be developed. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn this back over to Tim. This will be the informal question and Air Force response session. As Dr. Barley had mentioned, if we were there in person, it would be great, and folks would be walking through session and informally asking questions and talking. So that's what this portion of the meeting is for. And then formal formal comments will come after this session. So like Tim had mentioned, if folks could raise your hand and we'll unmute you as you raise your hand, and
Great.
Tim calls on you. And I'll just go ahead and turn that over to Tim.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much, Paula. We appreciate that. So again, we're moving now into that second segment of tonight's agenda, the informal Q&A portion. So as Paula just mentioned, if you have a question, please raise your hand electronically using that small button that looks like a hand there. And when I call on you, then Gina will bring you off mute. Please start off by stating your name and asking your question. And then I'd also ask any of those who may respond to your question to start by stating their name and then responding. So I noticed that Mr. Mike Munson of the Escoda Wurtsmith Airport Authority had his hand raised for a question. So we'll go to you, Mr. Munson. And Gina, if we can
yes, this is Mike Munson. Can you hear me okay?
We can, sir. Go ahead.
All right. I think this is a good plan. However, I do not see even a tentative dates to implement some of these actions. I think that's important for the community to understand that this isn't like when I plan to take my kids to Disney World and they ask me, I said soon. Well, what does soon mean? Give us an idea.
Hey, Mike. We have right now, our schedule shows that we are going to be mobilizing to the field to start the IRA in July, pending the approval of the record of decision. So that document needs to be prepared and go through review. So we're hopeful right now that this summer, early July, we will be moving to the field to start the IRA.
Okay, so that's the investigation part of it. And then once the investigation, which knowing the government takes a year, we're probably talking a year or two before we see any really action on this plan, if it comes true, correct?
No, I think you're or confusing investigation with the interim remedial action. So the IRA for Clark's Marsh that we are talking about here, we will be moving to the field in July to actually start that interim remedial action. So
okay, so what you're saying is that you'll be putting the wells in then, correct? If that's the plan and we go with.
Right, yeah. So we'll assume at this point, if this is in the end, if this is the preferred alternative or whatever the alternative is, we will start construction in July based on the current schedule. Again,
okay, I think thank you for that. I think that's the other shoe that needs to get dropped to give people some idea. This is not something that's going to be 5 or 6 years down the road. This is something that's going to start in July. That's important for, I think, all of our folks that are really concerned about this to know. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate that. I see Jeff Moss has his hand raised, so we'll go to Jeff Moss. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. We can hear you now.
Okay, thanks. So with the diagram, it appears that there are going to be some new extraction wells at FT002, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so the existing water that's coming out of Clark's Marsh currently and headed into the river, flowing out into Lake Huron, and if it's going to be July or a year for it to be affected, how is that, what's being done to go into to affect the actual PFAS and PFOA going in the river now and in the long-term future? So you're going to be affecting the groundwater, but what about the surface water inside of this plant?
Okay, that's a great question. So this interim remedial action is addressing the goal that we talked about is to reduce PFAS and PFOA from going into Clark's Marsh.
Right.
So we know that the groundwater moves through the marsh, and that's part of the remedial investigation is trying to determine where and how that groundwater makes its way to the surface. We know that in the pond that we showed in the figure that there's seeping there. We know that there are surface water seeps that come from groundwater, and we have to understand that before we can move to a remedy for the river. So this interim remedial action is focused on reducing the amount of PFAS and PFOA entering Clark's Marsh.
Okay, well, it's coming from FT002, and the data that we have clearly states that. But the issue for the community is that the surface water is contaminating the river and the big lake. And they're inside of the remedial action. My understanding is that the surface water was part of the investigation, and the remedial action, the surface water was going to be part of the program, but it's clearly not in that.
This is Dr. Catherine Barley. So I think you're mixing two projects. We have the remedial investigation. That's not what this meeting is for. The remedial investigation is separate. This is an interim remedial action. The goal is to implement the interim remedial action as soon as possible, with the goal that we have hydraulic capture so that we are not continuing to have that effect that you are stating.
And I think that what you're doing is to extend the curtain of FT002 leaching into the marsh. And I think that's a great action. I guess the community would like to hear if there's additional actions that could be taken for the water that's leaching into the river from the surface water, and actions that can be taken to be included in this project to reduce the high levels of toxins that are leaching into the river system now.
Absolutely. And this is the reason why you have this public comment period, so that you can go ahead and submit those questions to me and provide your constructive criticism, because I believe you actually have some ideas on how to do that, right?
There have been ideas presented by Mr. Henry, and this question has been ongoing for 3 years that I'm aware of. But if that's the next process, then that's the next process. So we will address that through the public comment period. Thank you.
Correct. And yes, it's very, very important that we do get your comments, because your comments actually help us make decisions. So I appreciate you bringing that to the table.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. This is Tim Sullivan again. Let me jump in, just mention the sequence of questions that I'll move to. In just a moment, we'll go to Mark Henry, then we'll go to Matt Baltus, to Tess Nelke, then Tony Spagnola, then Jacob Bennett, and I'll keep a running list of those who raised hands as well. So let's move to Mr. Mark Henry now. Mark?
I'm sorry, I must have put my hand up by mistake.
You were just stretching, I think. So.
No, I just noticed that my hand was up, and I must have hit that while messing with the screen. Apologize.
No problem.
I don't have
no problem. Well, let's move. Let's move then to Matt Baltus. Let's see, and Mr. Baltus. And Tina, if you could ensure that Matt Baltus is off of mute. Okay, we will come back to Mr. Baltus. Let's go to Tess Nelke.
I was wondering, I was looking at the conceptual layout that you have for FT002, and I wondered why you would install smaller carbon tanks rather than the two large tanks like that are there right now. And would the two larger tanks possibly process more water? And that space looks like it could handle the bigger tanks rather than three small tanks.
Okay, that's a great question. So the drawing is a conceptual drawing, so it's not to scale. So it's not possibly as large as it looks. But the reason that we're doing 3 smaller tanks instead of larger tanks is because of the processing of that water. And when we do our O&M and our maintenance and we backwash those tanks, we wanted to use smaller tanks, 3 smaller ones, so that we can get a much better backwash of those tanks. And then, because that backwash water will go into those 2 settling tanks that you see drawn on the right. Mm-hmm. So if we use smaller tanks, we can do a better job of O&M, which will result in a more efficient treatment system if we can do a better backwash on those smaller tanks. So that was the reason for going with 3 smaller tanks than doing 1 larger tank. The volume of water is the same that will be processed, but it will make it more efficient to do O&M on the system with the smaller ones.
And O&M means?
Oh, I'm sorry, operations and maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, ma'am. Let's go now to Mr. Tony Spagnola. Tony?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Tim. I have 2 questions. First, the plan is very clear in that the Air Force does not intend to comply with Michigan law, either the groundwater cleanup standards or the Rule 57 GSI standard. And so my first question is that in March of 2017, the Air Force, in writing, notified the Michigan Senate that and gave its assurance that the Air Force is working, and I'm quoting, with the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality to ensure compliance with applicable Michigan promulgated surface water standards for PFOA and PFOS in groundwater entering Clark's Marsh. That's specifically the GSI standard. Why is the Air Force not living up to that promise?
Sir, this is Cathie Barley. And so we are following CERCLA. This is a CERCLA process. We are trying to get interim remedial action in place right now while we are still conducting the RI, then the FS, then the proposed plan, and that's where the AARs come into play. So we are following the law. And with that, we are doing our best to protect the area, protect the environment, protect the people.
So, and this will lead into my second question. So in effect, the Air Force is going to be treating water and then pumping it back into the ground in excess of what's allowable under Michigan law, at least for the time being. The second question that I have is that, as we all know, there are several plumes and maybe more continuous one than depicted on the small map that was shown in the proposal. I'm concerned about the lack of context there because there's a lot more involved at the marsh, and I'm concerned because we often hear from the Air Force that Congress doesn't give them enough money, and unless we let Congress know how big the problem is, we're never going to get enough money. But my question is that under CERCLA, interim actions are called for when there's an imminent and substantial threat to human health or the environment. And I didn't see anywhere in the plan how that delineated. What are the threats? Where do they exist? And then how does the plan propose to address those specific risks? Not just by popping in 3 or 4 wells. I'm not trying to diminish the fact that that's being done, but there's no real context given or rationale for measuring success against the CERCLA standard. Can you explain why that's not in the plan?
So, sir, let's back it up a little bit. I'm going to ask Ms. Sharon Verzinga to go ahead and address your legal questions first, and then we will go ahead and continue on. Sharon.
Hi, this is Sharon Verzinga. I'm an attorney with the Air Force. I work in the restoration program. Back to your first question about why there aren't AARs in this interim remedial action that take in the state standards. This is, as Catherine said, an interim action, and it's building on an existing system that's in place. The existing system is governed by a state substantive requirements document, which sets standards for what we can have in our discharge from that system for PFOA and PFAS. Since we're building on an existing system, it makes sense that in the interim, while we're trying to figure out what the final answer is going to be at the end of the remedial investigation, feasibility study, the final record of decision, until we get there and we're building on an existing system, the standards governing that existing system hasn't changed. So those are, as we explained in the proposed plan, those are the standards this interim action will meet. But we were very clear in the proposed plan that when we get to a final action, that the state's groundwater cleanup criteria or any other state standards that qualify as applicable or relevant requirements, which is what AARs stands for those in the presentation who may not have known what that acronym was. We are going to comply with those when we get to that point. Rule 57 is surface water only. We're talking about groundwater and the groundwater surface water interface. So the 12 parts per trillion for the groundwater surface water interface, the other groundwater cleanup criteria, if those apply, are applicable or relevant and appropriate when we get to the final action, which I quite frankly fully expect they will be, then they're going to be chosen as AARs at that time. They just aren't AARs for this interim action that's building on an existing system.
Great, thank you, Sharon. And Mr. Spagnola, do you mind just restating that second question then so that Dr. Barley can respond?
Yeah, the second question is under CERCLA, interim remedial measures are called for when there is an imminent and substantial threat to human health and the environment. And in this plan, there is no delineation of the threats and no correlation stated as to how those threats are going to be addressed by the plan. In other words, how widespread are the problems? My personal opinion is that they're much wider than what is shown in this plan, given all the other plumes there, or any basis then for measuring success. So I guess my question is why that omission?
Ms. Verzinga, will you take this one as well?
Yes, this is Sharon Verzinga again. When you talk about the imminent and substantial endangerment, that is something we use as a measure when we're taking a removal action, which, as you know, we have done several removal actions at the former Wurtsmith Air Force Base to address PFOA, PFAS, particularly if we were worried about it being in drinking water. This is an interim remedial action, which is a little different than that. So it's not that we have identified another imminent and substantial endangerment right now where there's a pathway that to somebody's drinking water that we have to stop. This is taking a system that exists, and while we're trying to evaluate through the remedial investigation and the rest of the CERCLA process what the holistic answer will be, either for Wurtsmith as a whole or for Clark's Marsh as a whole, we're looking at what can we do in the interim, literally, to improve on the system that was put in place under a removal action. So it's a different sort of analysis than what we do in a removal action. And this is just optimizing a system that's in place to do as much as we can until we have the data that we need to come up with the final answer.
Great. Thank you very much. This is Tim Salton again. Mr. Spagnola, did you have any further question, or can we move on to Mr. Bennett?
Just one more, and that's there's no delineation of any of the groundwater cleanup standards for any of the other constituents other than PFOA and PFOS. I have been under the impression that that information was going to at least be provided. Could you explain?
So the expansion, the hydraulic control of PFAS, PFOA, by optimizing the way that we have modeled and that we have planned. But I do expect critiques and I do expect questions to come into me on this. And we should get the capture of all of the constituents by modeling for those two. Paula, would you like to go ahead and further explain that?
Yeah, and again, under this interim remedial action, we're looking at PFAS and PFOA. The other PFAS that Michigan has established groundwater cleanup criteria or are in the process of doing that, but have MCLs for, will be addressed in the remedial investigation. So that is part number one. The figure that you see that has the PFAS plus PFOA plume, this area of the fire training area that we're showing in this figure, are some of the highest concentrations that we have, and that's the goal of this remedy, is to reduce the volume of that material that's moving into Clark's Marsh, PFAS and PFOA. Even though the other PFAS may be within this plume as well, it's just not depicted on those concentrations, aren't depicted on that map because it kind of gets too busy in just that one figure. But we're capturing everything that's in the water. We're not just capturing PFAS and PFOA, but this is the focus of this action, is PFAS and PFOA.
Great, thank you, Paula. This is Tim Salton, post again. Let me move on to our additional folks who have their hands raised, and this is the order I will go in: Jacob Bennett, then Matt Baltus, Tim Cummings, Donna Tingley, and then Mark Henry. So first to Jacob Bennett.
Hi, this is Jake Bennett from Congressman Kilday's office. I just had two kind of technical questions because I wasn't sure. So when you're looking at the different plans and are they in compliance with the AAR levels, what is that? What's that goal level in parts per trillion for PFAS that you're judging by the AAR? And the other question I had is out of those two options, the ion and the GAC one, are one of them better? Do they filter the PFAS at a lower rate than over the other? I'm just wondering, because I saw they said they both are compliant with the AAR, but is one of them better than the other?
Okay, I'll start with the ion exchange and carbon question first. They are both adsorption technology. So as the water moves through there, the PFAS PFOA will adsorb onto either the ion exchange resin or the GAC. They're both very efficient. The difference really becomes in the quality of the water entering the system. For the ion exchange resin to be the most effective, the quality of that water has to be much better, so that we don't have biofouling in those tanks. So there would be additional pre-treatment to remove bacteria and different things like that. So that's kind of what makes the difference there. They're both very effective. It just depends on the quality of the water coming through. We know at the fire training area that the conditions there would require some substantial pre-treatment for the use of ion exchange resin. But once you take care of that, then they both are effective at absorbing the PFAS and PFOA. So on the second question, I don't know, Sharon, if you want to answer that question.
Hi, this is Sharon Verzinga again. I think, Mr. Bennett, you're asking about the AARs for this particular interim remedial action. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and Paula, I'm trying to remember the exact discharge requirements in the substantive requirements document. Is it 15 and 40 or 20 and 40?
It's 15 and 40.
And 15 is for PFAS?
I'm sorry, Sharon, it's 20. 20 and
Okay.
40, 20 PFAS
and 20 is, yeah. So it's 20 parts per trillion for PFAS and 40 parts per trillion for PFOA. Those are right. the limits that we can't discharge any more than those.
Okay, and both options are equally as efficient as getting it down to that level, then you're saying?
Yes, both alternatives would meet those levels.
Okay, because I know in some of the other options, they were other things they were saying it was even quite a bit lower, so that's why I didn't know if you had a number. What do you expect the levels to be when they come out of this unit, whether it's a GAC or the ion?
Well, I will say realistically, you know, the fire training area that's operating there now, they are achieving even non-detect levels while they're discharging at this point. So as you know, as absorption sites get taken up, of course, the concentrations that are making their way through increase, and that's when we do the O&M to change out those media beds. So, but currently, the fire training area is achieving, in some cases, non-detect levels of those going through.
Okay, so I guess theoretically it could meet the 12 parts per trillion if that was the level then, I'm guessing.
Correct, yeah. That's just, when you're looking at numbers lower, as you go lower in concentration, it just increases your O&M, I'll say. But they're both effective.
Okay, that's all I had. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bennett. Let's now move to Mr. Matt Baltus. Let's see, and Matt, it looks like you're self-muted. If you'd like to take yourself off mute. Okay, we will come back. Let's now move to Mr. Tim Cummings then. Sir.
Trustees. Hi, this is Tim Cummings from the Escoda Township Board of Trustees. I'm interested in following up on Mr. Bennett's question regarding efficiency. So, despite the fact that the second option needs additional pre-treatment, I'm curious to know if there's anything you can provide regarding rates of cleanup in something like gallons per hour, gallons per day, because, you know, even though there may be some additional pretreatment required, is it possible we could get more cleanup done faster with the second option, or is the third option the better choice?
So
Hi, this is Catherine.
Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, I was going to say that the gallons per minute that we'll be treating will be the same for both options. So we're adding 5 extraction wells, which will increase the capacity of the treatment system by 40%. So both of those options will achieve that.
Thank you.
And Dr. Barley, did you also have a response?
Yeah, just from a technical standpoint, the big problem with ion exchange and why I'm a little bit worried of that being able to provide the capture that is needed for this project is that it doesn't work well when you have high microbial growth. And we have already been seeing biofouling in the area, and the biofouling coming from microbial growth and the excretion of the polysaccharide-like film that they produce could actually mean less treatment than if we just do a GAC system that would not have that microbial problem.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cummings. And again, Tim Sullivan posts here, the order that will go in now is Donna Tingley, then Mark Henry, then AJ Birkbeck, then Tony Spagnola, then Greg Cole. So we'll turn to Donna Tingley.
Hello. Actually, my questions have already been answered. I was going to ask about the 2 different systems and how the current GAC was working, what the levels were coming out of there. But I think it's all been answered.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Let's see. It looks like Mark Henry may have a question. Go ahead, Mark.
Hi, I think this is Bob Delaney that you're supposed to be getting. That I think that somehow I'm under Mark's name because you called on me before, unmuted me, and then Mark stepped in. So can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, for some reason we have two Mark Henry names listed here.
Oh, okay.
So, but go ahead. Go ahead, Bob.
I'm supposed to be Bob Delaney. So one of the things that's clear to me from listening in on the public's questions and comments is that they don't know the true conceptual model of what's going on at the Clark's Marsh. There are essentially 5 or maybe 6 plumes that flow into Clark's Marsh, not just FT002, not just that one that we're talking about right now. And one of a very huge plume that's flowing into it is coming from the wastewater treatment lagoons and the old infiltration beds that the Air Force used. And that is coming into Clark's Marsh, and it is also going into the swamps to the west of Clark's Marsh. The other thing the public doesn't understand, and I don't know if the Air Force does too, but there are plumes in groundwater that go past Clark's Marsh. They don't discharge into Clark's Marsh. Rather, they discharge into the Asable River directly. And I'm concerned that the public isn't being told or shown these things, and it's really impossible for them to evaluate how good this remedy is. So when people are talking about, well, you're going to do this, but what about the water in the Clark's Marsh? That water is not going to clean up because FT002 is no longer discharging. There's still going to be other plumes coming into Clark's Marsh. The water will continue to be contaminated and continue to move out into the Asable River. Plus the groundwater, the plumes will continue to go too. So my questions really are these. What documents is the conceptual site model for Clark's Marsh that the Air Force has produced? Where is it in the administrative record so we can look at that? And then is there currently a demonstration of physical capture by the current system? By that I mean showing flow lines and monitoring results that show that, yeah, indeed the extraction system is capturing the whole plume. And if that's, there should be cross sections and there should be flow maps that show that. And then also, where would I look to find cross sections of the plume in this area? And then the last thing I want to also say for the public's understanding is that the Air Force isn't showing all the different contaminants that's out there on their maps, in their diagrams, in nothing. So you really don't understand the magnitude of the problem out in Clark's Marsh. They're also not talking about how much sediment contamination is that will continue to bleed off for years and years and years. So those are important things for the public to know. And I'd like to know that the Air Force is going to be presenting that stuff.
Okay, well, thank you for your questions, and I will try to keep them in order as we go through. So I think the first question was that all of the documents that have been produced that are related to the investigations of Clark's Marsh, the fire training area, are all available on the Air Force Administrative Record electronically or in the information repository at the library. So there are multiple documents. The site inspection report is there, the expanded site inspection report, the expanded site inspection report addendum. All of those documents are in those two locations. So there are many documents to look at. There are annual groundwater monitoring reports from the fire training area that are also available that show the concentrations, the groundwater results, the potentiometric maps or groundwater flow maps for the area. So all of that information is available in the AR administrative record and the information repository. The conceptual site model that we are currently working on that will be presented in the remedial investigation work plan, or the UFP QAP for the remedial investigation, that is under development, and that will be available when the remedial investigation report is produced and gone final. So that information, a more refined site conceptual model is being produced there, but all the other information that has been collected to date are in those two locations. Now you're going to have to remind me the other questions. Sorry.
Okay, where would I find a demonstration of physical capture? You just said the annual reports. You've got maps with flow lines on them. So I assume that's where you're pointing me to on those. And then the monitoring results will be there also.
Yeah, the capture of are you talking about the capture of the existing FT002 treatment system?
Yes. Yeah, that system to see how it's functioning currently. See if because we had some questions on the engineering, but those are too detailed to bring up in a public meeting. We're just wanting to know about the bring up the big picture stuff for here.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I'm concerned about is in those site inspection reports, you never reported any of the state data. And so those site inspection reports don't show all the information that's available, and people won't see the plumes discharging into the Asabo River directly. So anyway, just would like to see a better job done as far as explaining to people what the situation is as we know it right now. Because whenever we see these kinds of things, if I hadn't worked on this site for so long, nobody out here except for maybe Mark Henry would be able to actually evaluate whether this interim remedial action is a good idea or not. So, anyway, my point is that there needs to be a lot more exchange of information with the public.
All right. All of the documents that you are, like I said, they're either on the AR, the annual groundwater sampling reports for FT002, or out there that show the concentrations and the current plume capture of the treatment system. Those O&M reports are there. So I think that's the best place to go to look for that information. It's available in those locations.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Delaney, this is Cathie Barley again. So Eagle did evaluate this proposed plan as well as the Forest Service. So we've given our best shot at it. We look forward to your comments. I hope that you do provide something new that we haven't thought of and give us recommendations as to how you would see us moving forward. And hopefully, you're talking about Wurtsmith, contamination, not the township's wastewater treatment plant or something else. Because our modeling is all based on Wurtsmith and our sites on base.
Yeah, the wastewater treatment plant that is on the former base was transferred over to the township.
Right.
But the old fire training area, the disc that everybody's familiar with, the drainage from that was directed out into the wastewater treatment plant, and for many, many years. And so that went the treatment plant did not touch that contamination and deposited it directly into the infiltration beds. So there's an enormous plume generated from those infiltration beds.
Okay, and Mr. Delaney, just Tim Sullivan, let me just jump in real quick. I know we have a number of folks who want to ask questions. We have about 15 minutes left in our informal Q&A session before we go to formal comments. Let me just check to see if Mark Henry had a question that he would like to pose. Okay, well, let's move to AJ Birkbeck. And Gina, if you could.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, yes, sir, go ahead.
Fantastic, sorry about that. I'm AJ Birkbeck with the PFAS Alliance. Wanted to follow up on a question that Tony posed, which is a very good one regarding AARs. And, for those that aren't familiar with the CERCLA system, CERCLA contains federal law and what you need to do under federal law. And as we know, federal law is lacking with respect to PFAS. So you need to turn to state law, and the way that works itself into the federal paradigm under the NCP for a cleanup is through AARs. And I heard mentioned that we don't need to look at all the AARs at this point. We need to look at them for the final remedy, and I agree we need to look at them for the final remedy. But there was reference to an existing system, and because we don't have an existing system, we're not going to be meeting all those AARs. Under my understanding, AARs for interim actions should be every bit as stringent as for final remedy, unless there's a waiver or some other real legitimate reason that they should not be followed. And certainly the Part 201 cleanup standards for 7 different PFAS compounds should be considered AARs for the interim system that's being proposed. whether or not it can meet them, there are physical limitations on what can be met. But, I'm hearing that discharges are going to be at very low levels. And I'm just wondering, what is your basis for not including all 7 cleanup criteria as AARs for the IRM?
This is Sharon Verzinga with the Air Force. Again, we're building off an existing system that has state requirements already put on that system for what we have to do discharging from that system. So if you're expanding an existing system, you stay with the limits that have already been put on that system. If you in the proposed plan, I'm sure you've already read it, but I'll just give you the page reference. It's on page 11. We quote the CERCLA provision that says, if the remedial action selected is only part of a total remedial action that will attain such level or standard of control when completed, then the interim action doesn't have to meet all of those AARs that will apply to the formal final action. And that's what we're doing here. This is a piece of the bigger puzzle. And we're working just on this one piece right now. And this one piece is trying to optimize a system that's already in place so that we can increase the amount of PFOA and PFOS that we pull out of the groundwater from this existing plant. So as Paula already said, in many cases, the levels we're pulling out are going to be lower than the levels that are set in the substantive requirements document. But when you're trying to develop a plan that builds off an existing system, you stick with the limits that have already been put on that existing system.
Okay, so what you're saying then is that the state would need to adjust those limits if we wanted something that approached the state standards, that you're just proceeding under an existing permit then from the state.
It's not a permit because legally the state cannot issue a permit to the Air Force for an on-site discharge kind of action. That's in CERCLA. They have issued us a substantive requirements document, which is similar. The Air Force would be complying with discharge limits. We'd be talking to them about that. This is what they've set for us, is 20 for PFOS, 40 for PFOA.
Okay, so the substantive requirements document is your basis for not meeting the Part 201 cleanup standards as an AAR. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's twisting it a little bit. What we're saying is we're looking at the system that we're optimizing and looking at what is the appropriate AARs, are the appropriate AARs for the system that we're optimizing. And for that, we're using the standards that have been put on that system by the state. And the proposed plan also talks about there will be some other AARs having to do with solid waste disposal requirements and things like that, about construction of the extraction wells. But as far as the discharge to groundwater, those requirements are coming from the substantive requirements document.
Okay, I don't want to use up any more of the time. I would posit that the Part 201 cleanup standards should be AARs governing this IRM more than they do. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birkbeck. We appreciate that. The sequence of questions we have now is Tony Spagnola, then Greg Cole, then Mike Munson, then Arnie Larich. So we'll go to Mr. Spagnola.
Thank you. In light of the comments that we've had tonight about the both from Mr. Moss and Mr. Delaney about other things that could and maybe should be addressed here, we've been presented with really 2 alternatives, which is the installation of some monitoring wells, and it's pick one technology or the other. Will the Air Force consider comments suggesting that the capture zone or capture zones be extended or expanded in light of some of the comments we've heard tonight?
Yes, we will. This is Cathie Barley. We will consider all comments as we make our path forward. That's why it's important that you submit your comments, that you make sure they're thoughtful, that you make sure that you know what you're asking, and we actually know what you're asking, if that makes sense. So I encourage you to submit your comments. And if you believe that another well is needed, then say so. However, we have done our modeling, and we'll need to consider what you're saying with respect to the modeling, Eagles reviews, Forest Service reviews, and everything else. Everything works together to come up with a final moving point for a final decision.
Great, thank you, Dr. Barley. And I appreciate the question, Mr. Spagnola. Let's go to Greg Cole. And let's see if, Jana, could you unmute Greg Cole?
Can you hear me now?
I can, yes, sir, go ahead.
Yes, Greg Cole, member of the Now Need Our Water group here in Oscoda. My question is, we have two different technologies on the base right now. I understand that we're doing ion resin exchange, and what my question is, if that's true, will you be eliminating the ion process to use what you're saying is a more effective and cost-saving GAC technology?
I guess it's
This is Cathie Barley. Let me answer that. That's a programmatic question, Paula.
Okay, go ahead.
So right now we are at the beginning stages. We're at the RI. So our final treatment systems have not been determined for what we will actually do to take care of the PFAS and PFOA. This is an interim remedial action building on the system that we already have in place. The current ion exchange system, without doing another IRA or another process to change it out, it doesn't make sense to change it out at this point in time. It's already functioning. It might be dealing with some microbial population growth that reduces its efficiency, but that can all be overcome by the pretreatment that's currently in place. And we don't know what we're going to be putting in there as the proposed plan, not the interim proposed plan like what where we're currently at. We're doing a proposed plan for an interim remedial action right now, but the proposed plan that will lead to the record decision for the actual technology to be employed at the site. So there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot to be considered, but this is only one small piece of the puzzle, and the whole reason for this interim remedial action is to gain hydraulic capture. Does not affect any other interim remedial action.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We appreciate that. We have five more minutes for informal Q&A, and so we will go to Mike Munson. Go ahead, Mike.
There, I had a hard time unmuting, I'm sorry. My question was answered between the volley between the two attorneys. It appears that the Air Force is sticking to their guns in regards to higher contamination levels, but I guess that'll all work itself out, hopefully in the future when our Congress people get involved. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey, Mike, this is Cathie Barley. I'd like to comment on that. We're putting a new treatment system or new GAC in place, and that new system should provide non-detect. So whether or not we're currently saying we're adhering to the SRD in place, the decision documents or the substantive requirement document that's actually in place, we are still expecting to get non-detect from this system. So I want to be clear. We are still expecting non-detect. We're still expecting to be below the Michigan levels when we install the system or install a system, because it can still change.
Oh, okay, thank you for that clarity. I appreciate it. Mike Munson out.
Thank you very much, sir. Last question, most likely, here in the informal Q&A session is to Mr. Arne Lurich. Go ahead, Arne. And Gina, if you can go ahead and unmute Arnie LaRich. And then Arnie, you'll have to unmute yourself as well. And Arnie, yes, I see you're able to go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, regarding the SRD quasi permit that the state issued in 2014, I think it was, and then in 15 when it was put in place, the first FT002 GAC. That was based on technology-based standard and SRD requirements. Even the Air Force did not have much experience with GACs. I believe it was the first Air Force installed, maybe in the DoD. We're 6 years beyond that with technology. I strongly request that the Air Force review all of the GACs, all of the ionic exchange units that have been installed in the last 4 to 5 years, and update and offer to the state a new limits for the SRD to be modified. It is not fair because the CERCLA, you're right, the person who said this, CERCLA on site prohibits the state from issuing or requiring a permit. However, the Air Force, under the interim remedial action and any technology review that you do in implementing CERCLA, you can offer your experience at other sites. And as a matter of fact, you just stated a few minutes ago that you're meeting Nondetect. So why not bring that standard down? And secondly, as far as the two ionic exchange versus GAC, why isn't the Air Force looking at a pilot study on that pre-treatment of the biology, the biologic issue and blinding of ionic exchange, and use the system, put in a biologic control as a pre-treatment as a pilot study, because you may not be able to meet the hexane sulfonate, which is a lower chain, smaller chain. So at least you'll have that data to use in your RI later on. But if you could address the first question, I appreciate it.
And Arnie, I'm sorry, I think we're trying to figure out exactly how to approach that first question. Could you just re-summarize what that first question is for us?
The first question is, the SRD that the state issued to or negotiated with the Air Force in 2014 was a technology-based standard. That is a long time ago. It's a lot more technology. I believe the Air Force has new information that they can offer a better standard and design for their system to meet. And why isn't the Air Force offering that newer technology limit in the SRD for this new interim remedial action?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Any responses for Mr. LaRich?
Yes, this is Cathie Barley. So the key things right here that we're talking about is that this is an interim remedial action to obtain hydraulic capture. It is not the final remedy, sir, and we will address that as we move through the CERCLA process. We're doing our best with what we have right now, and honestly, we do need that remedial investigation data to really truly understand where the plumes are, how their extent, their source strength, and that's a different project, but we will get to that, okay? Right now, we are focused on the interim remedial action, which builds upon a current system, and that's where we're at.
Well, other sites have done pilot studies like Pease in 2015-16, based on the knowledge that was developed at Wurtsmith.
Trust me, Arnie,
And-
I am advocating for pilot studies. I have been advocating since I came on board. I put in numerous pilot studies over my Air Force career and before my Air Force career. So trust me, I'm working on it, okay?
Okay, well, hopefully you've got the money, because there was 13 million originally given to you to the Air Force last year. So, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Mr. Lurich. I appreciate that. And now I wanted to ask Gina to move us to slide 23. So I appreciate your questions. And I do want to make sure that we have enough time reserved for the formal public comment periods. So we're now transitioning out of that second segment of the agenda, the informal Q&A session, and into the final segment of the agenda, the formal public comment portion of tonight's meeting.
Tim, this is Paula. I want to ask Gina to advance to the next slide if she could. The next slide, it has Dr. Varley's contact information. I just want to leave that slide up so that as folks listen to the comments that are being made, they can jot down this information if they need to have it on hand.
Great, thank you. And so this is Tim Salton again. If you would like to make a comment tonight, please raise your hand electronically, kind of same procedures we used before. When I call on you, please state your name and make your comment. Please make it as succinctly as you can so that we have time to hear from others as well. Just as a reminder, the court reporter will record your comment word for word. The Air Force will not respond to your comment tonight. Instead, the Air Force will respond to comments within a responsiveness summary prepared after the end of the 30-day public comment period. So as you can see here, this slide indicates other ways that you can submit formal comments throughout this entire 30-day public comment period as well. So I have just continued with the names that were on the list. I'll check to see who.
Hey, Tim, this is Catherine Barley. So this is where the AR is located. Can you go back to the slide that has my contact information on it? Or Gina, can you go back to the slide 7, I believe? I want to make sure everybody has my email address and my address. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm just checking to see those who had hands raised previously. I see Mark Henry has his hand raised, so we'll go to Mark Henry. And Gina, that's the first one showed there, yep.
Okay, I'm sorry I didn't get to the microphone fast enough during the public discussion section. I did take a look at the administrative record for Wurtsmith Air Force Base because I have been frustrated by not being able to find documents related to the fire training area, at least recent documents. And in looking through them over the last 10 minutes, there is very little there about fire training area. And when you do a search, there's nothing there since 2018. So there doesn't seem to be any mechanism to be able to, for the public to be able to look at the details of the plume there and be able to provide rational arguments for positions that might be made. And I would request that if those documents are there and I am missing them for the past 2 years, that the AR numbers be provided to us, and I will share them with everybody that would have an interest, because I'm not seeing them there.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Henry. We appreciate that. Gina, I see that the entry also labeled Mark Henry, but the second entry, I think that may be Bob Delaney. So let's go ahead and unmute that. And Mr. Delaney, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, this is Robert Delaney, or Bob Delaney, and I'll be making my comments for the most part in written form, but I did want to say one of the things that the Air Force needs to do is to develop a baseline ecological impact out there, determine what's out there as far as the fish and mollusks and other things, and that may be being done in conjunction with the Forest Service or with the state of Michigan, which is all fine. But you know, one of the things is as you guys reduce contamination and do various things, seeing the effect on the wildlife is really critical, because that's the pathway to people. And so I would just encourage that to be done in the near future to get a really good baseline of the impacts on the wetlands and the wildlife there. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Delaney. I appreciate that. Looks like next on the list is Jeff Moss. So go ahead, Mr. Moss.
Thank you. I guess my confusion throughout this whole conversation is a remedial action for Clark's Marsh. And what seems to be happening is that you've identified that you have an existing treatment plant at FT002, which is on base, that has a direct plume that you've identified, and you're looking to contain it further. But what's the remediation in Clark's Marsh? So there's a lot of money that you're talking $10 to $12 million to remediate FT002, which is phenomenal, a site which has been identified for a myriad of time that we want an extension of wells in that area. But I'm wondering, what is the consideration of spending that $10 million to affect the surface water that's being contaminated at thousands of parts per trillion currently and ongoingly in Clark's Marsh? So I'm thrilled that the detection levels at FT002 coming from the GAC are near non-detect. But that's not the case of the water flowing at Clark's Marsh from the surface water, not the aquifer. And what we're talking about, remediation of Clark's Marsh, is not FT002. And I don't quite understand how you're calling this action a remediation in Clark's Marsh. Because what you're doing is extending the curtain at FT002, which affects Clark's Marsh. And as a community member of Oscoda and AuSable Township, we're seeing the ramifications of that in AuSable Township to where we don't know where we're getting the contamination from, because it can't be identified because of the dilution levels and the foam in the river and the foam in the lake and everything being addressed at the big lake and the river at the mouth is not attributed to Clark's Marsh, which is exactly the point source of where it's all coming from. So I would really like to know where that $10 million can be spent, where we can see some action taken in the marsh itself, along with addressing extending the curtain at FT002. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment, Mr. Moss. I appreciate that. We'll next turn to Mr. Mike Munson for a comment.
No, I raised my hand by mistake, so I'm all set. Thank you much. Mike Munson out.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I see David Wynn had a hand raised as well. David?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
A statement was made earlier relative to the fact that the state of Michigan and the Forestry Service had reviewed this proposal and provided their comments back to the Air Force. It would sure be nice to understand what those comments were, and hope that the state of Michigan's and the Forestry Service's comments were incorporated as part of this proposal. As I understand, those comments were only put together in the last probably 1 to 2 weeks that were presented. So I'm sure hope that this proposal that was presented tonight
had included the state of Michigan's and the Forestry Service comments. The other question or the other comment that I'd like to make is that I noticed on one of the slides that it stated that the data used most recently monitored data for the extraction wells was dated 2012 to 2019, and I'm wondering and I'm hoping that current data could be that data could be updated and used as part of that the proposal going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I see Greg Cheffin had a comment as well. So Greg.
Thank you. This is Greg Chafin from Representative Slotkin's office, and I was hoping to make this just comment and question during the informal session, but unfortunately didn't make it under the wire. I wanted to go back to a comment that was made earlier about commitments that the Air Force made to the Michigan State Legislature in 2017, and then referencing Catherine's statements about getting down to a non-detect standard. Given the commitments that the Air Force made, I'm curious just as to why if the plan is to get to a non-detect standard, that why those commitments can't be upheld, and sort of what happened in the intervening period between when those commitments were made and now. So thank you for that.
All right, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. Tony Spagnola has a comment. Go ahead, Mr. Spagnola.
Thank you, Tim. I would just like to say, in light of the questions that were raised earlier tonight, it's even more clear, and this issue has been percolating for several weeks now, that it would have been far more efficient and appropriate for these comments to have been, and questions to have been taken, received, and thought about much earlier in this process. Not after two alternatives have been pointed to and presented. This process by which this proposal has been developed has been conducted in secret and has not involved a single soul from Oscoda. There's nothing in CERCLA that says the Air Force and the state agencies are to conduct this review in secret. There's nothing anywhere that would have even prevented the Air Force from contacting the community when this went up on the administrative record on March 1st. We had to find out from the news media. And I think that many of these questions could have been addressed and incorporated into this plan, and we'd be much further along in the process. I suspect that the plan might also be far more comprehensive because it's much too narrow. I hope that the Air Force will take this into consideration on the Van Etten Lake plan that's being developed, include people much more early in the process. Secondly, I want to point out that I keep hearing that because this is an interim remedial action, that somehow we can do, or the Air Force can do, something less than what should be done in the end. That is a poor use and poor management of taxpayer dollars. Do it right and do it right now. And I go back again to the fact that the Air Force made a promise to the state of Michigan that it was working in 2017, 4 years ago, to comply with the GSI at Clark's Marsh. Again, there is nothing in CERCLA, nothing, that prohibits the Air Force from fulfilling that commitment. And to say that the Air Force is going to wait for another so many years and do some more studies really undercuts the veracity and integrity of that promise that was made to the state of Michigan and to our community. We're looking for the Air Force to be a partner. And by those comments and the way that this process has been handled, we really are treated more as an outsider and almost as the enemy in this. I see we have an unclassified document here on the slides. Before tonight, everything was classified as if somehow we're the enemy. That needs to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spagnola. I appreciate your comment, sir. I see Jeff Moss, you have your hand up still. Would you like to make a comment, sir?
Nope, thank you. I'm all set. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. I see Alyssa Stewart has a comment, so go ahead, Alyssa.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Stewart. I'm a NOW member. I'm also the varsity swim coach in our area. And first of all, I want to say thank you for the work that you have put in. But we need to continue to push for that. There definitely needs to be more done at Clark Marsh. As someone who is involved in aquatics in the area, it is extremely important to us. And as somebody, I'm a clean water ambassador for the state of Michigan as well. So if you were interested in getting a committee of Oscodians put together so that we can be more in contact and know more of what's going on, I would be happy to do so.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Stewart. We appreciate your comments. Let's see, are there other comments? Just indicate by raising your hand electronically if you would, and we'll record those comments word for word. I see Mr. Arnie Lurich has a comment, so Mr. Lurich, we'll go to you.
Hi, Tim. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
On page 20 of your presentation, there's a diagram of the new conceptual layout. Does the plumbing of that new system allow for a better increased uptime of the pumping of the well fields because of change out of the old GAC versus the new GAC? Can you make sure that there's always 100% of the water flowing from and capturing, including a power backup? So we increase the uptime and capture time above the 95%, or have better assurance that you will do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Lurich. We appreciate that. I see that Christina Coulon is attempting to make a comment, or it has before. Looks like a PIN needs to be entered. So Gina, let me just see if you can connect with Christina and try to sort that out. While that occurs, are there other comments, other folks who would like to make comments? I see Shannon Abbott would like to make a comment. So Ms. Abbott, your way.
There we go. Hi, my name is Shannon Abbott. I work within the environmental nonprofit world, but I'm actually making a comment on behalf of myself tonight, and I wasn't planning on doing that. I just wanted to echo something that Tony said earlier, and that is we continuously are hearing in this conversation tonight that you are meeting the minimums with this IRA and that you don't have to do better than you are with this. And I just want to say that we need to, as the Air Force and as a community and as a state and as a federal government, we all need to do better and not just put forth the bare minimum. We need to do better and know that it's going to benefit us all. It's going to save us money, time in the long run, but it's also going to impact our health and the safety of all of our community members if we do the work now and take that extra step now. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Abbott. I appreciate that. This is Tim Salton again, and do we have others who would like to make a comment? I see Rex Vaughn has raised his hand, so we'll turn to you, Mr. Vaughn. And yeah, go ahead, Rex. Rex, it looks like you just need to take yourself off mute, and we should be good to go. Okay, so Rex, when you have the opportunity, just click that mute button to take yourself off mute, and we'll come your way. let's see, as that technical issue is being worked through, please let me see if anyone else would like to make a comment. I see Jennifer Hill has a hand up, so we'll turn to Jennifer Hill. And Jennifer, if you can just click off of mute and we should be able to hear you.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yes, this is Jennifer Hill from National Wildlife Federation, and
Jennifer, we may have lost you there. Are you with us? And do we have Jennifer Hill with us? Okay, while Jennifer works with that mute button, let's see if anyone else has a comment to make. Rex Vaughn, I see your hand is up. Would you like to make a comment, sir?
Can you hear me now?
I can, yes, sir.
All right, sorry for the technological faux pas earlier trying to unmute myself.
Bro, go ahead.
During tonight's discussion, related to the differences between the SRD at 2040 and the current state regulations at much lower levels, which will probably be in effect at the time that you go to final solution, it seems to be an unwise and really inefficient approach to spend $10 million on a system that will only do 2040, when if you drop in a couple of more carbon tanks and maybe change a couple pumps, you could be in the position that that system would be ready to meet those requirements down the road without spending another nickel. So I think it's an unwise use of taxpayer money to restrict that system to a 2040 condition when you know right now that you're going to have to do a lot better in a couple of years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. I appreciate your comment. Let's check in with Jennifer Hill to see if Jennifer is with us. Okay. And Jennifer, if you are free, go ahead and take yourself off mute. Thank you all for your patience with the technology we've all had to learn to deal with over this last year or more. And Jennifer, go ahead. I can, go ahead.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Technological difficulties. Okay, yes, so I was in the middle of saying that, you know, I just wanted to echo a lot of the comments that were heard tonight, and they're very, you know, there are a lot of concerns being raised, and I really hope that the sentiment that I heard tonight from the Air Force, that you all are really going to thoughtfully take these
Okay, and just a note, Jennifer, we have lost audio on you. We'll come back your way and see if you're able to reconnect. But of course, as displayed here, there are various other ways to get comments in during this 30-day public comment period here. So please continue to work on that. And if not, you can use one of those other methods. We'll go now to Mr. Paul Rakowski for a comment. Over to you, Mr. Rakowski.
How's that?
I can hear you, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, good. I just wanted to speak up and congratulate the Air Force with the job they're doing. And I think they're going above and beyond what might be necessary. And I commend them for wanting to take an approach where they have all the data that they need to gather during the RI before they make a decision on the final remedy. I think that's the right approach. That's all I got. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. And let's see, do we have Jennifer Hill back with us just yet? Okay, I see Rex Vaughn has a hand raised. Rex, do you have an additional comment you'd like to make for the record?
No, I do not. Let me make sure it's shut off.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. And do we have other comments from folks? And this is a good opportunity for a quick commercial. As you see the slide displayed here, there are a variety of other ways to submit comments during this public comment period as well. I'm just continuing to check to see if hands are raised. I see Arnie Lurich has a comment, so to Mr. Lurich.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Tim?
sir.
Okay.
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Is this interim remedial action dictated by technology and analysis, or is it limited by budget? And the point that I want to bring into this question is that there was $13.5 million authorized by Congress in FY21 to bring interim actions to Wurtsmith. And Congressman Kildee spoke to that on 2 occasions. So I'd like an answer for the record on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And as indicated, so the Air Force will be gathering comments and responding to those in a responsiveness summary at the conclusion of that 30-day public comment period. And this is one way to submit those in. Are there other comments that folks would like to make? I see AJ Birkbeck would like to make a comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, again, I would just like to repeat that I believe that the 7 Part 201 groundwater cleanup criteria should all be considered as AARs, in spite of the fact that the state did issue some guidance some time ago before those were put into place to the Air Force for discharges from their system. So I guess my question would be, what is the basis for not including those as AARs at this interim action? Again, those are targets, and I don't see why we shouldn't be aiming towards targets that are in fact existing law here in Michigan. That's the whole purpose of the AAR system, is to incorporate state standards that may be more stringent than federal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Are there other comments? And as I was indicating previously, so a written summary of comments and information submitted during the public comment period and the Air Force response would be in the responsiveness summary, including the Clark's Marsh Interim ROD. Dr. Barley, let me just make sure that is accurately relayed by me.
Yes, sir, you are correct.
Thank you. Okay, do we have other comments to include? I see Jennifer Hill is with us. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yes, hello. Okay. So this is Jennifer Hill with National Wildlife Federation, and I'll just start over. So I really, there are a lot of, I think, concerning comments that came up tonight about the scope and the stringency of the plans and the standards that are being talked about to be met for these plans. And I was glad to hear, and I really encourage the Air Force to follow through on the commitment to thoughtfully consider comments from the community about what needs to happen to make these plans meet the needs that are being expressed by the community. And I would just say and reiterate, this point has been made many times, but that the while there may be minimum standards that need to be met, the longer we wait to address problems, the more costly the solutions are, and the more impacts we have to people, wildlife, and to the economy in Oscoda. So I encourage you to meet the strongest standards that you're able to meet, and it sounds like those are able to be met at this time, and I encourage the Air Force to look at that again and think about doing that. Thanks so much.
Great, and thank you very much for your patience. We appreciate your persistence as well, Ms. Hill. Are there other comments? And just as a reminder, we're in that final section of the agenda, the formal public comment portion of the agenda. And comments are being recorded by a court reporter as well. See, Rex Vaughn has a hand up. Mr. Vaughn.
Thank you, Tim. A follow-up comment I'd like to make is if economic technology exists that would allow the effluent discharge off the FT002 system that will allow it to meet the Part 201 standards, it would be economically foolish not to deploy them at this time, because the cost to go back in and change that system again to comply with the AARs that are going to come out of this whole process at the end of the RI and the feasibility study would be a classic case of government waste of taxpayer monies. There was a congressman years ago that used to issue a golden fleece award to where he thought wasteful spending took place in government, and I would nominate the decision not to meet the Part 201 as a potential candidate for the Golden Fleece Award if the Air Force doesn't change their position. So in the public or in their comments to the response of these formal comments, I would like to have the Air Force do a much better job of explaining why they wouldn't want to meet those standards today instead of doing it all over again a few years down the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. I appreciate that. I see Bentley Johnson has a hand raised, so we'll turn to Bentley Johnson.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. I'll keep my comments quick because I think I will follow up with written comments, or rather my organization, Michigan League of Conservation Voters, will follow up with some specific comments, technical comments, probably join some other groups on written comments as well. But wanted to emphasize a couple things. First, I think transparency needs to be at the forefront, and not only just transparency, but as I listen to some of the back and forth and some of the challenges of local elected officials, local residents, non-governmental organization groups, there seems to be a challenge in getting information, and with presumably everyone with similar goals of protecting public health, cleaning up this mess. I think it's really vital that we're working off of the same information, and that those inputs from really knowledgeable experts, some of whom have been working on this for years, really be brought in, because I am worried about the big picture and about different plumes and different areas being missed because of a piecemeal approach and not making whether it's the underlying data or maps available and making it clear about where and how you can access that information. So that's one piece. And then I would just associate my comments with folks that went before me about cleaning up to the state standard and really reevaluating best available technology along the way to make sure that we can do that. And as people said before, that not only most importantly will help save lives and help prevent exposure and health impacts, but it will help use taxpayer dollars wisely. And I guess I'll stop there because I think I'm eager to continue to hear from a variety of experts about some of the technical aspects of this plan. From what I've heard so far, it seems like there could be more monitoring. It seems like there's some analysis about the location of different extraction wells, and want to make sure that this particular plan and future remedial actions and the remedial investigation is done in the way that we can get the most bang for our buck and prevention. So thanks for the opportunity to comment, and you can expect to hear more from Michigan League of Conservation Voters and our members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. I appreciate that. Looks like we have time for maybe one more comment. I see Arnie Ulrich has his hand raised. So Arnie, your way.
Before 2015, when the original FT002 GAC unit was installed, the Air Force, in my opinion, was doing a pretty good job listening to the state DEQ on that action needed to be taken. And they put that GAC unit in, not knowing all the information that they would have liked, but they took a chance on it. Since 2014 and 15 and 16, with the new EPA drinking water standards, the Air Force, in my opinion, has backed away and not been innovative, not been thinking about what could be done, but only what someone at a higher level has been dictating the budget will be or the criteria will be set. And I'm addressing this to the higher managers of the Air Force and the Department of Defense. And there has to be a change. And I want to end with that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Ulrich. I appreciate that. And I think we are coming rapidly on the end of the time that we had allotted here for the public meeting tonight. I'd like to thank everyone for their participation and turn to Dr. Barley. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to share now?
Yes, I'd just like to thank everybody for making this meeting and putting time into their schedules to be able to provide constructive criticism into the process. We look forward to getting additional comments and hopefully providing action at this space where we know that action has been asked for and we want to provide it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We appreciate your comments. We appreciate everyone's participation, and our public meeting for the proposed plan is adjourned. Have a nice evening. Thank you.